episode of Adventures in Contracting. I am Leona Charles, the CEO and president of SBC Business Consulting, where we do all things government contracts. And today we are going to talk about what I think is single-handedly the worst prosecution of contract fraud I have ever seen, and how that relates to the Rule of Two changes that are floating around and the 8A audit that the SBA has recently announced. First, some quick housekeeping. We are available on just about every form of social media you can imagine, where I do a horrible job of keeping it up, but we are there nonetheless. Oh, you can find Adventures in Contracting on Instagram, on LinkedIn, on Facebook. You can find SBC Consulting on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, TikTok. Like I said, I do a horrible job of keeping up, but we are there, and I do check it. So anyways, back to this case. So this case is interesting in that it should have been a slam dunk for the government, and essentially it was, but the outcome is an outcome that you would expect for a case that maybe wasn't a slam dunk, maybe a case that was a little trickier, had a little bit more nuance. But this case, they had ostensibly plenty of evidence. They had some confessions. They had a bunch of people that kind of rolled over. So it's the outcome is strange, to say none the least. It's a little lackluster in my opinion. But let's get right to it. So the case is against PM Consulting Group LLC, doing business as Vistant. So Walter Barnes is the president of Vistant. It's a Towson contractor. They're an IT and program management contractor. The second company involved is Aprio, and Daryl Britt is the president. They are another IT and program management company. And then there is a subcontractor, Paul Young, who was subcontracted to provide IT services. So, and then there's the strange kind of company too, who is a Maryland private equity company, who the filings never identify. So I could not figure out who it is. If you guys know who it is, I would love to know. But in my research, I was not able to figure out who it was. So what is interesting about this lawsuit is that it spans from 2009 to 2023. So they kind of went back through a pretty large period of time. And what they are being charged with is 18 USC B1A, which is the bribery of public officials. More technically, it's corruptly giving a thing of value to a public official with the intent to influence an official act. And they're also being charged with securities fraud. Securities fraud because of the way that they transferred some of the bribes. So here's what's being alleged. What's being alleged is that these two companies and this contracting officer from USAID, his name is, Robert Watson. He's the USAID contracting officer. So this complaint alleges that Vistant and Aprio gave Roderick Watson cash, iPhones, laptops, an NBA suite, a country club wedding, down payments on 2 residential mortgages, cashier's checks to pay off debt, a Martha's Vineyard vacation, and jobs for assorted relatives. So they're also including in this, in bribery and fraud, the contracts that they won, but also the contracts that they bid for. So why are the contracts that they bid for included in the total value of the fraud and bribery? Well, it's because the Small Business Act allows for a presumption of loss when a business is misidentified. So here's kind of my first issue, right? Because they weren't misidentified. There's no issue as to whether or not these 8A companies were not controlled by the correct group, like by disadvantaged group. There's no, in any filings that I saw, there is no discussion about, it was misidentified, that they're not truly an 8A company, they're not truly disadvantaged. That was not even alluded to. So I am not sure why they included the bids, because they're not misidentified. So strictly by the Small Business Act, by statute, it doesn't fall under there. Fraud, sure, fine, go for it. But the presumption of loss because of misidentification, I didn't see that anywhere. Um, so what happened is basically they're alleging that these companies got together, they got with the CO for a period of uh what is it, 5 6 years they got together. They are more than that, I'm sorry. From the period between 2009 to 2023, that they were in collusion with the contracting officer to, kind of pay for play. I'm going to give you this, you're going to give me some contracts, everybody's going to make out like a bandit, that's going to be good. And, it's what we would term as a kickback in contracting to the contracting officer. So I want to be clear that I absolutely believe these things happen. Absolutely believe they happen. I don't have a doubt in my mind. But I'm a little concerned at the things that were filed by the government because they are not up to the standard that I'm used to seeing the DOJ produce when they're going after companies for fraud. Um, it just it looked like it was rushed to do, and it looked like there were no real issues. I mean, aside from the fraud, which was purely text based. But let's go through what the overt acts that they filed were. So they say on July 31st, shortly before USAID awarded Barnes and Vistance its first prime contact, that Watson discussed with Young how he would approach the CEO for payments. He said, I'm starting money talks with Barnes just to test the water. And then Young replied with, do your thing, my brother. And then Watson later said, I sure appreciate the PRE work that goes into all of this, and it's work just to get people in the program office to see my way. Now, to be fair, contracting officers do often have to go to program offices and negotiate with them for things that the program office needs, and really kind of work with them to say, is this something that is feasible and reasonable, and is this something that's in the government's best interest? How do we do this? Tell me exactly what you need, which is where technical specs come in, right? So a lot of times offices will want things because it's the new flashy thing, but it doesn't serve the government any purpose. So a lot of times contracting officers will find themselves in the middle of a director or a program manager who is kind of jumping up and down for something, and it really is the contracting officer's job to safeguard that spending. They have the fiduciary responsibility to be a responsible steward of public funds. So it's their job to go in and say, that's not really something that we need. We have to do a build buy analysis. Is it going to cost us more money to build it versus buying it? And if so, can we buy it at a reasonable market price? So they say that on May 6, 2021, Barnes made the first of several payments to Watson. One of them was $2,500 for a country club wedding, which ended up costing over $30,000. So they don't say if that entire $30,000 was paid, but I am going to presume that that's what they're rolling into it, even though in the court filings there is no specific mention that he paid for the entire $30,000. On July 1st, Barnes, through Vistant, wired $34,500 to Company One, which submitted a sham invoice to Barnes to conceal the payment. So this is where that wire fraud charge is coming in. $30,000 of which Young transferred that week to Watson in 4 separate payments on company payroll. Again, this is where that wire charge is coming from. On or about March 8th, 2022, Young transferred $6,500 to Watson, which was the same amount of money that Barnes transferred to Young on or about the same day, again proving wire fraud. In or around August 2022, Watson provided Barnes with a technical evaluation package, and for those of you new to government contracting, when you submit a bid, you generally, if it's a larger contract, let's even if it's a fully open and competitive contract, they're usually split into two volumes. One is the technical approach, and two is the financial volume or your cost proposal. It's called any number of things, but technically it's how much your bid cost. The technical evaluation package is what is received during source selection, and it's what the panel uses to evaluate all of the proposals received for that particular opportunity. So it is said that Watson provided Barnes with the technical evaluation package, which is a violation of procurement law because you can't you can't give them a competitive advantage, and you also can't divulge any procurement information to them in the evaluation stage. Like there's a zero contact order at that point. So he was provided that evaluation package containing confidential source selection information as to the status of their proposals and their competitors' proposals, and initially awarded a contract with value of approximately $143 million. The package included USAID's assessment of strengths and weaknesses of all of the bids, which indicated that Vistant was not the top candidate. Now, I will tell you, when a bid is evaluated, particularly if the evaluation criteria is best value, you can have awardees who were not the highest scored, but if they produced a technical response that was superior in the criteria that mattered, you can have a contracting officer who will get an award memo and say, yeah, I get it, but this person is hitting the most important parts of the proposal that we needed them to hit, right? Especially if it's like an emergency one. Typically that doesn't happen. Typically CEOs like to say, this is the criteria, who scored the best, that is who's being awarded it, right? I have seen it happen. I don't think it's appropriate, but it isn't technically illegal, right? If they can provide a justification as to why this other person is going to be awarded over someone else, and that justification is sound, maybe they have access to some proprietary tech that, even though they didn't score great on their team, or they didn't score great on their past performance, this particular tech is so out of this world that it is going to transform this project. Things like that. Those are things that can be used as justifications. During the same month and next month, Barnes withdrew funds from a Vistant account to buy cashier's checks totaling more than $50,000, which were used to pay Watson's debts. In or around October 22nd, as a bid that Vistant submitted on the $143 million USAID is being evaluated, Barnes paid approximately $60,000 in two transfers from Young, which Watson used to close on a new home. So again, this is where that wire fraud is coming in, and this is where they're including the potential loss. Again, that presumed loss is based on mischaracterization, and these companies are not mischaracterized. So I'm still at a loss as to how this is being used in the total valuation. Not that it mattered because the settlement was ridiculous, but just in leading up to it, I don't understand because they weren't mischaracterized. So on January 18th, 2023, this is when Watson texted Barnes and said, it was told today that we are back at business as usual, that there are no findings from me to you. We can't get lax ever again. Gotta stay tight. This could have gone way worse. I gotta admit to you that I was pissed at how all of this happened, as I am sure you understand. And Barnes replied, yes, but understand, and I feel horrible and sorry about it all. So this text message right here would have been enough to slam the book on them. I mean, that and the receipt of the technical evaluation from source selection, the country club, wedding, the payments, all of that would have been enough on its own to secure a conviction of fraud. So I am not sure why, and I would have frankly gone with wire fraud. So I'm not sure why they did the presumption of loss, because it was unnecessary. They already had everything that they needed. So on March 1st of 2022, PM Consulting Group, doing business as Vistant, kind of said, yeah, you got us. Okay, that's fine. Now, here is the infuriating thing about this entire situation, right? So they spend all this time, they make this big press release of, oh my God, we found all of this fraud and all of this corruption. However, when it comes time to do a deferred prosecution agreement, the government says that it's a very serious in nature. It's fraudulent. It's wire fraud. It's a presumption of loss. And however, the offices, with assistance of a forensic accounting expert, conducted an independent ability to pay analysis, considering a range of factors outlined in the Justice Department's inability to pay guidance, right? So they've gone from alleging that this company got $800 million to now alleging that they can't pay the fine. So the law allows them to fine them up to $90 million. So USSG 8C31B, the minimum guideline fine is $180 million, but that is greater than the maximum fine authorized by 18 USC 3571D, which is $90,955,516. Therefore, all they could fine them legally was $90,955,516. Now, when you're alleging they got over $800 million in fraudulent contracts, $90 million still doesn't make the government whole, but it goes a long way towards doing that, right? So here's what they decided. They decided that that would adversely affect the company. Why they care, I have no idea, right? These companies are criminals. They have stolen from the government. So why there is now a predilection to whether or not the company is going to survive, whether or not, they're going to function, I have no idea. You're alleging that they stole $800 million. Why does the government care whether or not this company survives to an agency that is currently being dismantled? I have no idea. But the government decided, yeah, you sold $800 million for us. We're going to settle with a civil settlement agreement of $100,000 and no criminal indictments. What? That is insane. But that is what the government settled. That was their big no criminal penalties and $100,000. I mean, seriously. That was their big that was their big catch. All right, so quickly, because I think I've gone on and on about this, why is this important? Well, it's important because FAR 19502-2 is total small business set aside, and it's commonly referred to as a rule of two, meaning that most contracts can be set aside if there are two like businesses that are capable of providing the service at a reasonable rate to the government. So that is under attack, and this case is kind of being used to bolster that. Also, there's the 8A audit. So administrator Loeffler has come out saying that they're going to be covering a 15-year period, and they're going to focus on sole source, 8A contracts, set-aside contracts, and joint ventures to see if this scenario has happened before and to go after the people that have done it. So again, $100,000 for a alleged $800 million is crazy work to me, but that is what the government set on. So I would love to hear your thoughts on it, and I appreciate the listen.